watcher of this program, you know the answer to it already. All of the men pictured on this wall have been past presidents of the Kennett Chamber of Commerce. And we have this gentleman right here. J.R. Early was president of the chamber in 1964. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Tell me about what brought you to Kennett. Were you born in Kennett? Was in business? What brings you here?
Well, I was born in 1929 in Arkansas, around Tyronza, Mark Tree.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved to Kennett when I was 3 years old. Dad bought 40 acres east of Kennett, 3 miles east of Kennett. It was still in woods. And he bought that 40 acres for $1,200. And he cleared the land on it, and that's where we lived for about 4 years in the old house that was on the farm when he bought it, which was just a 2-room cypress board house. I remember the snow sifting in through the cracks on it.
Ah, okay. Now, those were the days when 40 acres and a mule, you could make a living with that.
Well, that's right, and that's what he had, 40 acres and a mule.
Okay.
And he cleared the...
well, now, was this road here? Was there...
Well, Highway 84, going from Hayti to Kennett, was part gravel and part concrete.
So it was a half and half.
Right, and they would switch halves every once in a while, so everybody going in every direction could have some concrete and some gravel.
And everybody drove on the concrete side till just before you met the car.
That's right, till you played chicken, really.
Yeah, I've done that between Kennett and Kennett and Cardwell.
Right.
I've done it the other section.
Yeah.
All right, so your first work here in Kennett, your first job.
Well, let me just go back to this just a minute, because I'm kind of proud of what my dad did out there. He cleared that timber off of that farm, and then with the mules and everyone who's old timers around here knows about sprouting, digging up the sprouts and trying to make a farm out of it. But he took the lumber and he used the car that we had then, which was a Model A, as the power for a sawmill. And
you used the car?
Yes, he made a pulley for the back wheel. He'd take the back wheel off and he'd put this pulley.
I don't suppose you have a picture of it.
No, I don't think we had a camera.
I don't know that they were even invented at that time. Okay,
but anyway, he made a sawmill that he used to saw some of the lumber. He would get it at a big sawmill. He'd get it sawed up into dimension lumber, and then in this little sawmill that he had, he could saw
run off of his
car.
His T model?
Model A.
Model A,
yeah.
Okay.
But the interesting thing was that my mother got a job at the shirt factory here in Kennett, and we lived 3 miles out in the country, so he had to bring her to work every morning.
Had to put the wheel back on the car.
Right. So at 4 o'clock or whenever she got off from work, he'd have to take the pulley off the car and put the wheel back on, come to Kennett and get her and go back home.
Now, you think you've got it tough, but now I've never heard a story like this. Now, that's great.
Well, it was. And you know, he had this team of mules, and I can remember having to pump water for those mules, and they can really drink water when you're pumping.
And as a kid, and you felt so sorry for yourself as you're standing there pumping.
But you know, there again, the water went through a trough and cooled the milk before it went out into the horse trough for them to drink. So every time you pump fresh water, you're just pumping cool water around the milk.
Okay. And you said your mother worked at Ely Walker. Did she work there many years? What was her impression of this activity?
Well, of course, the shirt factory just absolutely was the salvation for many families in this area, because it gave an income. The people worked hard. You know, the place was not air conditioned. They didn't have individual motors on the machines. They had what they call a drive shaft that went down, and belts come off of the drive shaft to the machines. And it would get so hot in there that the women learned how to put pieces of cardboard on the belts, and that would kind of act as a fan, you know, would blow air on them. And they worked by piece. You got paid by how many pieces that you did.
Yeah.
And on Saturdays I worked at Graver's. But then in the summertime, why, Mr. Randall was the postmaster, and he put me on a route carrying mail, which I loved that.
Okay, all right.
I really did like carrying mail. I was 16 years old.
When did you start then at your...
At the bank?
Yeah.
Well, I got a letter at high school from Earl Jones. It was delivered to my room at school.
He probably watched you pedal that bicycle back and forth and knew you
And I think there's a little bit more to it than that. Mr. Randall, who was a postmaster, used to work for Earl Jones.
Oh, okay.
And Earl Jones, I think, was influential or instrumental in getting his appointment as postmaster. In those days, they were kind of political appointees.
It was absolutely political appointee in those days.
Well, I was putting it mildly.
Oh, okay. All right, I think that's nice. That's charitable. Okay.
But anyway, I think he was instrumental in having Mr. Jones write me a letter and ask me if I wanted to come in for a job interview. So I came into his office on a Saturday morning, and he sat on the desk, and I'm 17 years old, and the only thing I could see really that stared me in the face was a great big diamond stick pin that he had right here. He wore that diamond stick pin whether he had a tie on or not. He had
Oh,
that,
he did?
And I'm sitting here at eye level with that thing.
And you were impressed.
I was impressed,
Yes,
true.
yes.
And so at that time, he was chairman of the board of 3 banks and owned about 2,500 acres of land, and was
So he was some businessman.
and involved with
Yes,
5 cotton
yes.
gins.
Okay.
And he said he needed a young man to start learning the business, working with him and everything, and wondered if I'd be interested. Well, my leanings had been to mechanical engineering. That's what I wanted to get into. I wanted to go...
Banking was not one of your thoughts?
No, although our class annual says I wanted to be a banker. But I already had this offer then, so I knew that my career path had changed.
Okay, now talk to me about the changes you've seen take place in Kennett in these years. When did you get into the Chamber of Commerce? Do you remember the year you?
Well, of course, you know, banks always put their people out in the civic organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Jones was the second president of the Chamber of Commerce, and of course he made me a member of the Chamber of Commerce through the bank and through his associations almost as soon as I started working there.
So you came into the chamber, what year would you say? Do you know the year?
I really don't know. It was probably somewhere around 58, because I was really involved in the Junior Chamber of Commerce at that time.
There was a Junior Chamber of Commerce.
Well, it's the JC's.
Oh, that's right. Okay,
Right.
all right. Now,
And
does the chamber work?
We had a very active JC club.
Now, do they work very closely with the Chamber of Commerce?
No, not necessarily, but I think that was the original
The
goal.
original plan.
Right.
For the young men to start out in the Junior
right,
Chamber.
Right, because
What's the first project you remember doing as a JC? Can you remember what you got involved with?
Well, of course, yes. We put on big music shows, for one thing, as fundraiser. We became a very wealthy JC club. In fact, we provided the first seed money for the American Legion Community Building.
Oh, you did? Well, tell me about this. How did this come about?
Dolph Riggs was the commander of the American Legion for years and years and years. And the American Legion owns everything from the South Bypass, including the golf course and the airport and everything, fairgrounds.
And the property was owned by him where this chamber office that you now sit in.
That's right. But when they conceived the idea of we needed a community building, which was the small part of what's now the community building here, the American Legion building, the Chamber of Commerce was going to, was going to raise the money, and they were going to get them from businesses and from civic clubs and so forth. You know how small towns have to raise their money. So the JCs, we were fairly wealthy at the time. I think we had around $7,000, and so we were about to buy a building of our own. In fact, we were about to buy a building down there across from the old Presnell Hospital. And a Bible JC club told us that's the worst thing you can do is buy a building, because then you devote all your activities to doing something for the building. You're either enlarging it, or you're doing this, or you're doing something to it, and you forget all your other civic obligations. So
good advice.
It was.
Good advice.
It was. And I can see where that would have could have happened.
So you didn't let it happen.
So we decided that we would put $5,000 into this American Legion building, and what is now the coat room was going to be the JC office.
What is now the coat room, all right?
But we never did develop an office, so it was made a coat room. And but we used that building. If you remember, it was one of the biggest meeting buildings in town for a long time.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
But the JCs did provide the first donation for that building.
And that building was built in in '64?
I don't know. I don't know when that building was built. I can't remember, but it wasn't one of the Chamber of Commerce projects.
Okay.
In fact, I can't think of anything really big that happened during my administration at the Chamber of Commerce.
Well,
one of the projects that I had was I wanted to get welcome to Kennett signs at all 4 entrances. And we did that year, and it seems like a kind of a minor thing now, but we did put them up, but they were wooden signs, and they deteriorated after about 10 years, you know.
Okay.
And so.
And we documented with our cameras the putting up of these that
The
we
new
have
ones that
now,
we have
the new
now,
ones.
which is going to be there forever, I think.
But now you all had original signs there in what, '64? You had
Probably '64, I think, is when we finally got them out, because I can remember that was one of my things that I said was our accomplishment during that year.
What would you say was the thing you spent most of your time working with or on as a president?
I can't remember any big projects that we had at that time. I think we were just kind of loping along. Of course, you know, we had the hotel then, and that was our meeting place. That's where we had our banquet, and it was a very elegant building. We had a big dining room, and I remember the Chamber of Commerce banquet. All the ladies were dressed up in their furs and everything. It was a big event. And
so the chamber banquet was there. Now I remember going to some banquets in this hotel. I don't remember what year it was finished, but
I was pretty much felt intimidated. I was 35 years old, and I was succeeding people like Charlie Baker and Earl Jones and John Dalton, and I just didn't feel up to the job. I don't know why I was elected, because I was a teller at the bank at the time, but I think it might have been because of the activities that we had in the JCs.
So you had been active in the junior club, and now that
I was president in 1962.
Of the JCs?
Of the JCs.
Okay, so in '64 then, when you came into the chamber?
I think it was kind of a carryover. They probably had a void they need to fill.
All right, you've been talking with, you've been listening to J.R. Early, longtime Kennett resident, president of the Chamber of Commerce in 1964, and you've heard him tell about some of his early impressions of Kennett. And J.R., we thank you for coming out and